Hi, I'm Daniel Chico with the Fight for Liberty. Thank you for joining me on this new edition of the Fight for Liberty. We're going to go over some news and then talk about our subject of the week. Hope you enjoy this episode. Don't forget to subscribe to the site. We'll be doing special videos for the site coming in February. We're going to be integrating our site into the videos more and having special videos there. I wanted to start off with this article from Yahoo News that I'm currently looking at. The Americans' trust in media hits all-time low according to a new data poll. Elderman's annual trust barometer says that only 48% of Americans trust traditional mainstream media now. This is no surprise after the Trump administration completely dismantled the mainstream media, calling them out for their lies. And, you know, we knew this way before even the Trump administration even took office, that the media was telling lies, and not telling the truth. And they've been known liars. Over 58% now oppose the mainstream media in America. This is crazy. This is big news. And someone says in this, I use the News Voice app, which I highly recommend because it points out the biases of each news source. Someone said in this comment section, regardless of your political ideology, everyone can agree that the American media is of severe poor quality and has complete disregard for real journalism. Now, I wish people would all say that, but they won't. They'll go to lengths to defend the media, especially if they're Democrats. They tend to defend the media. Still, I've seen it over and over again. CNN and BBC are both very deadly. The British bullcrap company and the Criminal News Network both are under severe attack of low ratings, all-time low ratings for these mainstream media outlets. And they're just going to hit even lower ratings now that President Trump is gone and the new Biden administration has took office. Now, we'll talk about that, and we'll talk about the inauguration and so on and so forth. And there's some people who still have this disillusion that the president is going to come back in March, and 1776 is going to commence again in March when President Trump returns. But we have to be looking at different alternatives and kind of moving past that and looking at 2024 and 2022 of what we can do politically, and maybe starting the Patriot Party. Hopefully will be something that we can do. But now, on his first full day in office, President Biden signed the Gender Dysphoria Act, which gender identity order, which triggers mixed reactions in many Americans. Now, men can join women's sports, and women can join men's sports, and everybody's confused. LGBTQ groups have, of course, welcomed this, which is really a shame. And Chuck Schumer, now the majority leader, unfortunately, that crooked Chuck Schumer is saying that they'll receive the articles to impeach former President Trump. A former president is going to be impeached. Absolutely absurd, absolutely ridiculous that we are impeaching a former president. It is, it's a disgrace to the nation that we're doing this and wasting tax dollars. I thought we're supposed to move on and unite, but Pelosi said that this is a form of unity. She's a disillusioned Jack Daniels drinking polygrip lady who Senator Kennedy said, I don't know if he's related to the Kennedys, but he did say that she probably tried a Tide Pod once in her lifetime. I'll play that video for you now.
Particularly recently, when I think Speaker Pelosi is one of those people who tried Tide Pods.
That video for you now. So there you have it. The Tide Pod lady, Nancy Pelosi, as Senator Kennedy stated. Biden now says that the Black Lives Matter protesters would have been treated differently than the Capitol mob. Same old bullcrap. Hank Aaron, the famed baseball player, died 2 weeks after receiving the COVID-19 vaccine. No surprise there. Biden orders target federal minimum wage increase just for the feds. Elon Musk says he's donating $100 towards a prize for the best carbon capture technology. Here's what he means. We're not going to go over that. Articles impeachment, of course, February 8th. We all said that. Already said that. Biden says nothing can change of what is going to happen. The trajectory of the COVID pandemic. So he says that he basically can't do anything, which we all knew was going to happen, even though they looked at him as being the savior of humankind against COVID-19. He just admitted that he cannot defeat the COVID virus like he claimed like he would. He said there's nothing I can do at this point. Basically, he's a helpless old man, as we expected. And it's unfortunate that they're going to do all this and totally overturn everything that the president has worked for. I commend him on what he's done for this country. The former president now, Donald J. Trump. And now we have to set our sights on things. And Californians are now going to ban the sale of flavored tobacco. That means you won't be able to get crap, because that's what I really wanted to talk about that. That's kind of a segue into what we're talking about for this episode, is the Republican establishment. We're talking about them. We're talking about the rhinos and so on and so forth. They are so concerned. Them and the Democrats are so concerned with things like big tobacco. We're going to defeat big tobacco by banning this or banning that, raising the age to 21. It does nothing. In fact, it's like the whole marijuana thing with the Republicans. Let's keep marijuana illegal. People are still going to smoke it. People are going to want to smoke it even more because it's illegal. And it's completely absurd and ridiculous that we think that that's going to prevent people from doing it. And these grassroots so-called Republicans like Jeff Sessions, who spent his 2 years in acting as the Attorney General of the United States just to waste 2 years trying to bust marijuana people, it's insulting, these stupid Republicans. And this episode's entitled "What the Right Gets Wrong Sometimes," and what they get wrong is stuff like that, focusing on illicit drugs, and we're gonna we're gonna have the big bust and all that. Meanwhile, with the Iran Contra and the whole Arkansas Mena scandal, when the Clintons were shipping in bales of cocaine with the CIA, I mean, we're just gonna ignore that with Bush and Reagan and the Clintons shipping in drugs, but yet we're gonna say we have a war on drugs. That is completely just ridiculous. And I believe that certain things, the government should be kept out of it, maybe. And I do think that drugs is one of them. Prostitution's another one. Now, from a religious standpoint or a Christian standpoint, yes, those things are wrong, and I completely condemn them. But I don't think that it's up to the government to control that and regulate that. I mean, they should control and regulate it, but I don't believe it's up to them to make it illicit and illegal. Because at the end of the day, everything that the government does just encourages people to do even more, or doesn't do, whatever. But such as the Capitol violence and stuff like that, they said that they don't want people to start rioting or anything, but they want it. They want it. That's actually what they want. They want the opposite, because they know people's reaction is going to be, reverse psychology. That's basically what they're using on folks. And I believe the Republicans are very good at that. They play mind tricks and mind games, and I do believe that there's a controlled kind of, I wouldn't say control, I mean, I don't want to go too conspiratorial. We do that for the fightfortruth.com and when we do that podcast, but the Fight for Liberty has been posting special videos of more conspiratorial material. But there is kind of a controlled opposition within the right-wing movement. Breitbart, the last 2 years, actually since Andrew Breitbart himself died or was killed, the rumor is, they haven't been a good site for a long time. The Daily Caller is going down the crap hole after the Capitol riots and the election. They started criticizing the conservative, the America First movement, particularly really hard, and they gone down the crap hole. Thank thank the Lord that Tucker doesn't really work for them. Tucker Carlson, who I think has been solid on Fox News, the only solid, honest journalist, and on Fox News Network. I mean, Sean Hannity, I also have a griping with because, he covered up the whole WMD thing with the weapons of mass destruction that Bush used to go into Iraq. And, he covered. I'm not saying that he doesn't have valid points because I've watched Hannity before. I've watched the president speak to Hannity on President Trump speak to Hannity on the television, and when Fox News comes up and they have some kind of special report, of course I'll watch Hannity. When he interviewed Assange, I thought that was one of the best interviews I've ever seen. The Pilger interview and the Sean Hannity interview were probably the most honest Julian Assange interviews that I've ever seen. So Sean Hannity as a journalist isn't that bad, but I'm saying some of his opinions are very establishment Republicans, and he's getting that money kind of, from the big right-wing, media outlets, like Fox News, who, are completely rhino Republican establishment, and he's kind of gotten over that in recent years, which I applaud him to, but sometimes he still goes back to that. But that's my gripe with him, and Fox News as a whole. We already know what happened with them over the election course and how crappy they went. They're complete sellouts. Don't even want to mention George Soros by name. Let's not talk about George Soros. I mean, Newt Gingrich, who's a former member of the Moloch Owl Club Bohemian Grove, wants to call out Soros, who I'm not a big fan of. He was the former Speaker of the House, I believe, during Clinton's administration. I'm not a big fan of him at all. I think he's a rhino and he's kind of a sleazeball. I know he put his support behind the president, but he wanted to talk about Soros. Fox News didn't even want to mention Soros' name, and they completely moved on from it. I'll play that clip for you right now.
Yeah, look, the number one problem in almost all these cities is George Soros elected left-wing, anti-police, pro-criminal district attorneys who refuse to keep people locked up. Just yesterday, they put somebody back on the street who's wanted for 2 different murders in New York City. You cannot solve this problem, and both Harris and Biden have talked very proudly about what they call progressive district attorneys. Progressive district attorneys are anti-police, pro-criminal, and overwhelmingly elected with George Soros' money, and they're a major cause of the violence we're seeing because they keep putting the violent criminals back on the street.
I'm not sure we need to bring George Soros into this.
I was going to say you get the last word, Speaker.
He paid for it. I mean, why can't we discuss the fact that millions of dollars he spent?
I agree with Melissa. George Soros doesn't need to be a part of this conversation.
Okay. So it's verboten.
All right, we're going to. Okay, we're going to move on. A historic day at the White House. We covered it from stem to stern.
So there you have it, folks. I mean, Fox News completely just disregarding the whole Soros movement, or Soros, being influencing, elections across the world, or his voting machines, or the way he wants to crash the dollar and so on and so forth, and then all his shares in video games and all these different companies he has influence over. They didn't want to talk about that, but Newt Gingrich, who is a Moloch worshiper, wanted to talk about Soros. So, and they still wouldn't let him. Even one of the most establishment Republicans out there, the former Speaker of the House, Newt Gingrich, didn't even get to speak about Soros. And maybe he's not as bad as he was, but he's kind of like the Hannity I compare him to Hannity because they're not as bad as they used to be when the Bush administration was happening and the Clinton administration was happening, and they were kind of rhinos back then, but now they've kind of tamed down. But going on to that, and then going on to Mitch McConnell and Lindsey Graham and all these other politicians, Dan Crenshaw, who said he's pro Second Amendment, and then over there advocating for red flag laws, said he's pro Christian, pro Bible, and then calls Jesus a superhero. I mean, these guys can't be trusted. Mitch McConnell's a greedy little old turtle who hasn't done anything. He's made his state poorer than dirt because he doesn't want to do anything financially for them, because he just wants to get that China money. You know, he has deep ties with China too. Mitch McConnell is a big Chinese guy. He loves communist China. He's an establishment Republican too. Lindsey Graham as well, who's a little crybaby. Who, you know, last few months he's kind of been wishy-washy. He's been solid for a little bit, then wishy-washy. And I'm just not a fan of him either. Tooney and Thune and all these rhinos who have just completely turned their backs on the American people are sick, and they need to be voted out. And I believe that's why the Republicans lost the Georgia Senate races, because they didn't have enough motivation behind them because of the way Mitch McConnell handled the stimulus and completely forgot about the American people and then went and gave aid to foreign countries. I think that's why they felt not the need to vote into that Georgia runoff election, because of the fact that Mitch McConnell and the Republicans completely let them down in more ways than one. So these guys need to be voted out, and that's why I'm a big advocate for the third party movement, for a Patriot Party. If we're going to do a Patriot Party, let's go ahead and do it. Let's have a Patriot Party. That'd be amazing. I think it would be great. And, you know, we've seen in the past with people like Ross Perot, who really wanted to make the third party movement successful but failed, or the Green Party or the Libertarian Party. It's been a failure. But I think they can do it. I really think that if they have someone as big as Donald Trump or even a Rand Paul or Ted Cruz behind them, they definitely could be successful at winning elections and definitely winning, being elected officials in Congress, in both chambers of Congress. I think they could really do it. And I think it's time to vote out these rhino Republicans, vote out these demon Democrats, and move on from the whole disillusion, because I think we're all under kind of a disillusion with these with these Republicans as well. You know, and I always criticize the Democrats, but I think the Republicans deserve their fair share of criticism too. That's why I'm making this. But people like Ben Shapiro, who are establishment commentators, he's a very intellectual person. In a lot of ways, he's a libertarian. In a lot of ways, not. A lot of ways, I feel like he feels like whatever he says is solid truth, and a lot of people take it as truth. If Ben Shapiro says take a vaccine, people are going to be like, oh, I'm going to take a vaccine. He must be right about vaccines. He's completely wrong about the COVID vaccine and the mRNA vaccine. And he's just more of an establishment Republican who thinks that the Republicans can do no wrong. And he was a never Trumper before. And now he's acting like he's all on Trump's side. And then now he's not. He's gone off the presidency. Now he doesn't like him anymore. So he's kind of a trendy in a lot of ways. But he's also a rhino Republican who I disagree with on a lot of stuff. I don't really agree with him on a lot of stuff. I think someone like Steven Crowder is very solid, even though I don't agree with everything Crowder says, because I know he was a Bush supporter and all that, and he's just basic conservative. He's going to vote conservative always because those are his beliefs, and I totally respect that. I think he's been solid. I don't agree 100% with him, but he's not as bad as someone who's Ben Shapiro, who's more of an establishment elite, and everybody takes him. Everything he says is fact. Everything he says is great. Hello, would you like a Ben Shapiro show? I'm Ben Shapiro, you know. So I just don't buy into it. I mean, for a while there, I was listening to him because he's solid and he's an intellectual, but I just can't. I can't get on with it. It's just annoying after a while, and especially his stance on the things with COVID. When he went on the Joe Rogan show saying that masks were a good thing and all this stuff, it's just like
solid proximity with each other for long periods of time.
Yes,
right. That's the stuff where people are getting this stuff, and I trust most Americans. Not like some Americans are dumbasses. Some people are just dumbasses.
Oh, there's a lot of videos. I don't know if you watch YouTube. There's plenty of Karens out there. How sad is it if your name is Karen and you're a good person? All the good Karens out there. I'm sorry, ladies. I'm really sorry.
But it's like this is I made this point online. I got shellacked for it, but I was pointing out that most Americans are wearing masks right now. By polling data, 59% of Americans say that they always wear a mask when they leave the house. And if you look at the map of mask wearing, across the board, in the places where there are the most cases, people are wearing masks. I wasn't saying masks don't work. I wear a mask. I think that the evidence shows that they do something. We don't know that they're not like full protective. The cloth masks are not as effective as surgical masks, which are not as effective as N95s. But wear a mask, good. The point that I was making is people are acting in fairly rational fashion, meaning if you think COVID is like around you.
I don't buy it. I don't like it. He's more of a guy who doesn't know how to question everything. He doesn't know how to question things. He kind of takes everything as at face value, and that's that. It doesn't go beyond that, you know. And I think there's a problem with that because he has an intellectual flaw in that way where he can't move past whatever's at face value. He thinks everything is just the way it appears, and I bet, you know, he reads Fox News articles every day saying that this is fact, and all his writers are like, yes, this is fact. And, you know, I had an issue with the Blaze TV when Glenn Beck acquired CRTV. I had an issue with Glenn Beck because he's kind of, again, back to that establishment Republican, never Trumper kind of thing. But he's become a lot better over the course since they kind of acquired CRTV. I think everybody's really surprised of how great everybody at the Blaze TV is, and, you know, Elijah Schaefer and Glenn Beck and Steven Crowder, people like that. They're really they're all really solid now. I feel like they're all really solid journalists. So I applaud them as far as right-wing media, because I really think that if there's establishment Republicans, I think those are the ones to kind of go to. Because they're solid. They're always solid in their facts, and they always lay it out how it is. And I think those are people that I rather follow than the people over at the Daily Wire. And, you know, the Daily Wire has some good people. You know, Michael Knowles, he's pretty solid. He's not terrible, but not everything I agree. I feel like he's too moderate I wouldn't say he's too moderate. I mean, he's too staunch conservative, too kind of neoconservative. And I would put Ben Shapiro kind of in an extreme neocon, kind of like, my opinion's better than yours and blah, blah, blah. And what I say is fact, and everything's at face value, and don't question anything. And that's who Ben Shapiro is. Michael Knowles, not as much, but he's still kind of like staunch conservative. Candace Owens, who just recently joined the Daily Wire and Ben Shapiro, she kind of becomes a brand, you know, like with Ben Shapiro. Candace Owens became a brand. She no longer became, you know, Candace Owens. It was like whatever Candace Owens says is true. It's true as hell, you know. That's what people were thinking, you know. They're kind of in that brainwash mentality. Oh, she says it must be true. And I don't like that. I don't like that at all, because she said that this foreign aid was in the foreign aid was in the stimulus bill, but it actually ended up being in the defense bill. And, you know, she just became commercialized. She commercialized herself. So she kind of sold herself out a little bit and kind of became something she was not, because I remember previously she was redpillblack.com. That's what her name was, Red Pill Black. She appeared on InfoWars and the Alex Jones Show, and she was solid. She was great. Everything she said was amazing. And I feel like she was a little more humble back then. When she was doing those nights with Alex Jones on InfoWars, and, you know, guest hosting and then being a guest on InfoWars, she was more solid back then. And I feel like she really had a lot. She was less establishment, and it was less of a brand. And now it's like Candace Owens is a brand. She's kind of sold herself as a brand more than actually being genuine as a person as she was before. And she kind of got her ego a little inflated. And I feel like that's what Ben Shapiro kind of has. He kind of has an inflated ego, thinking he's right all the time, and that everything he says is solid and it's fact, and take everything at face value. And I'm not criticizing him, because he is an intellectual, and he's part of that intellectual dark web, so to speak, which I didn't really buy into at first. But, you know, Jordan Peterson's solid. He's great. You know, I wouldn't call him right-wing or conservative, maybe a little conservative, but more of a libertarian psychologist. And I don't consider him really as a political figure, more as a philosopher and a psychologist. But Ben Shapiro, can't really stand him. Candace Owens kind of ego got inflated, and, you know, she kind of forgot who she was, and it became about the commercialism of the whole thing and less about the genuine beliefs. And that's the issue that I kind of have with these conservative commentators. And Charlie Kirk, screw Charlie Kirk, he's worthless. Turning Point USA is kind of worthless. They've really done nothing for the America First movement. They're kind of just, you know, their mouths, talking mouths, you know, for the conservative establishment. That's all they are, talking pieces. And that's all Charlie Kirk is. He's more of an actor than anything. for the conservative movement. He's not really a journalist. I wouldn't call him a journalist, and I wouldn't call him I wouldn't call him anything, really. He hasn't really done anything except for act like he's part of this. He's this big political head. He's really not, honestly. He's probably the worst, I think, out of all of them. So just totally establishment, just awful. But moving on, I was going to talk about someone in particular who I do like. I like PragerU, so I want to mention PragerU because I do like PragerU again. Very educational. I don't agree with everything that they put out about, certain things like 9/11, so on and so forth, and just different things. I don't always agree with them, but I would say I agree with probably 88% of what they put out, and I think that's a solid conservative site. And Dennis Prager's amazing. He's a great guy. He has great points. He's very wise in his age. So hats off to Dennis Prager and PragerU. But I was thinking about someone else. I'm trying to remember now who I was thinking about, who's really solid in the conservative movement that I really admire. I mean, obviously we could talk about Tucker all day and how solid he is. But Daily Caller, since he left, hasn't been very solid, as I said before. It's kind of gone downhill a little bit. And I see this right-wing journalism kind of going downhill. I see a lot of these guys going downhill. And a lot of less people listening to them because they're not, because President Trump is no longer president. And then I see a lot of them that are going to be coming up. I see the Blaze TV is probably going to be coming up as a big conservative. It already is. Elijah Schaffer and all of the guys that they have over there is going to be really big. I can't remember the person I was going to talk about, but I know they're solid. Whoever it was, I can't really trying to think of something to remind me of them. But anyways, just these establishment Republicans that we need to get rid of, and these establishment journalist Republicans that really we just need to turn off and stop following their whole movement, because it's fake and it's disingenuous in a lot of ways. It's they kind of got bought and paid for by commercialism and corporations and so on and so forth. I know Newsmax is solid. I mean, if you want like professional coverage, some people want that. I mean, I know I want professional coverage of the news. I want to see, an actual, established news place that's solid. Newsmax has been solid. I mean, since the election, they were amazing on election night, and that's all I watched on election night. They're great to watch. I highly recommend. If you haven't got on Newsmax, get on Newsmax and watch some Newsmax. I might do that myself pretty soon here, but they're solid on covering the news. And, Sean Spicer, former press secretary of the Trump administration, I believe in 2017 and 2018 is on there, and he always has great points. Sometimes they can be a little establishment, but most of the time they're not. They even address the Georgia Senate that, the Georgia senators weren't really solid, and they kind of screwed the American people too. They realized that these Georgia senators screwed the American people during the stimulus and during the year too, and they realized that these Georgia senators weren't really that popular amongst the people, and they mentioned that they weren't that good of candidates. And so I admire Newsmax for saying that. So there's a lot of good sources out there that, as I mentioned, but there's a lot of bad ones that I think we've been obsessing over too much. And the Daily Wire and Caller and Breitbart, kind of them, and Fox News are kind of those people. And the QAnon movement too still believes that Trump's going to be president by some miraculous Bernie Sanders driven pipe dream kind of. The QAnon movement, no disrespect, and I don't mean any disrespect for anybody who watches these guys. I'm just telling people to be aware of what these guys do and say and stuff like that. It doesn't really match with what's actually happening, and the QAnon movement is part of that, and I condemn any violence that has happened because of that movement. And I know most the people are peaceful. Actually, probably 90% of them are peaceful, and they're great patriots, and they believe in our country, and they believed that President Trump can do so much good, but only one man can do so much. I know that he wanted to indict the traitors and stuff like that, and there was a movement to do that with the Durham report, but Barr and the Department of Justice completely let us down, crapped on us, and it never saw the light of day. So sealed indictments are not coming. If they do come, I'll believe it when I see it, and if President Trump becomes president again, I'll believe it when I see it. But until then, I totally dismiss what's happening with what they say is happening, because I don't believe that's what's happening. I believe that right now it's time for the conservative movement to come together and start to work on the next plan of what we're all going to do and what's going to happen next. And if that's the Patriot Party, then so be it. I think that'd be a beautiful thing if we have a third party, as I said before. But yeah, with the QAnon movement, I think it's time to kind of move past that and realize that the president did all he could, and it was out of his hands. And now we have to put it in the hands of God and kind of pray and see what we're going to do next as an American First movement and as the conservative movement of the United States. But that's all I really have. I'll probably go over this a little bit more, some of the subjects and some of the people I talked about in the next video. We're going to do more news next week, so I hope you join us there because I kind of want to get back into the news. I'm Daniel Cheever with Fight for Liberty.